Hi, I'm Sierra Evans. Can you tell me a little bit about yourself?
Well, I guess I should begin with my name. It's Don Dudley, and I'm pleased to have the opportunity to talk to you about some of my life experiences.
What was it like going after an FCC radio license in the 1970s?
It was a very difficult period. There were 8,000 radio stations and only 6 or 7 black-owned. So when it was down at single digits, it was a challenge. I got involved because I was working as a business and advertising manager for Seattle Magazine, which at that time was owned by King Broadcasting Company. While I was there, a local daytime radio station, daytime means it could only be on the air from sunrise till sunset, licensed to Kirkland, Washington, programmed to the black community. All of the employees went on strike because they felt they were being used by the white ownership of that station. And I was asked to come in and help settle that strike, or to see if I could settle it. And that's how I got involved. And I settled the strike, was offered the opportunity to come work as the general manager, and I said, why would I do that? I'm in management at King. Why would I come to a daytime radio station as a manager? And I was offered 15% of the stock. And I asked, well, have you paid a dividend? What good will 15% of the stock be? And then the offer was said, okay, we'll give you an option to buy the balance of the stock over a 3-year period at different prices. The lowest price being the first year, a higher price the second year, and then again a higher price the third year. I exercised that option. It was not expected because I had to go out and raise the money to do it. And that was the challenge.
What was it like being an African American with a radio station?
Well, at that time, the general market stations were playing very little black artists. There was some crossover, Billy Eckstine, etc., maybe to another degree, Nat King Cole. But for the most part, black artists were not played on the general market stations. So the only place you could hear black music was on a station programmed to the black community. Additionally, the only place you could receive news about what goes on in the black communities across the nation was at a black-oriented station. So what it was like is you were more in it to serve the community than you were to serve your commercial ends.
How many black owners were there?
I was the 7th one out of 8,000 radio stations. I was the 7th black owner and the first on the West Coast.
What are you most proud of?
It's hard to talk about anything that gives you a source of pride. I am most grateful for that opportunity to serve and to experience those dynamics. We had a solid commitment to serve that community, and I was called before Congress at one point to testify as to why we felt it was important for us to have a black-oriented station. And I told them it's because we are the farm club for the major stations, that were trying to integrate their ranks. But in order for them to hire somebody in a major market, you had to have experience. Most of those experiences were gathered in rural and smaller markets. But those were not markets where African Americans were being employed. So the only place they could get the experience to graduate to ABC, NBC, CBS was at a black-oriented station. And we fostered many national sportscasters, newscasters, camera people, etc., by giving them that opportunity to hone their skills at a black-oriented station.
What were your greatest challenges?
To be taken seriously. Seattle is not what would be considered a black market. So we were a radio station that couldn't garner national advertising because we couldn't match the black populations in many of the southern cities or in New York, Chicago, Philadelphia, whatever. So the national advertising did not come in. We had to survive on local advertising, and we were as competitive as any local station in the local market. But 40 to 60, in many cases, % of your revenue was national. Mm-hmm. And so we were always very far behind the general market stations.
What role did the radio station play in the African American community?
Again, it was the source of learning about black artists. It was the source of learning about news relevant to what was going on in Black America. We had a national black news network that we were affiliated with. And as a consequence, in the Seattle area, in the black households, we had 96% penetration.
What have you learned in your lifetime that you think will benefit the overall community?
It is important to understand that the results we seek in our life depend on our preparation and our thoughts. Some people think it's a matter of being in the right place at the right time, that's how opportunity is met. But the way opportunity is availed is when opportunity meets preparation. And so there's nothing we can't do if we're willing to do the solid work. I often say, if we're willing to sweat, to do what we have to do to achieve what we want to achieve. And so for me, when I bought the radio station, as I said, when they signed that agreement with me, they never thought there would be any possibility of me buying because of the amount of money involved. But I was able to put together a limited partnership, get it registered with Washington State Department of Securities, and go out and sell units of limited partnership sufficient to meet the obligation of the purchase. So I gave notice by wire right before midnight, the end of the year, and I spent the 4 months that it would take for the application to clear the Federal Communications Commission raising the money I had to put down to get an AM FM radio station. Because I bought the stock of the corporation that owned it.
How difficult was it to raise money for the radio?
Very difficult, because we got a lot of support, but it wasn't serious investment. It was those wanting to say that they supported a black-owned station. So as I told you, I sold units at $4,000 each. The head of Weyerhaeuser, at that time, the Bill Gates of this area, was a fellow by the name of Norton Clapp. He was an investor. Gordon Sweeney, who was the chairman of Safeco, was an investor. Chuck Piggott of PACCAR was an investor. So I did well in getting that. Herb Bridge, that owned Ben Bridge Jewelers, was one of my investors. Morial Haddif, who owned Long Acres Racing, was one of my investors. But none of them serious. So that when it came time for us to do the kind of capital upgrade necessary to make us a serious contender in the market, i.e., I owned an FM that was 19,000 watts at a time when the state of the art was 100,000 watts circular and polarized. I needed 200,000 to upgrade the station. And why that mattered is that we were just a few years behind the Bay Area. And at that time in the Bay Area, simply to get a permit for an FM station cost $3 to $5 million. And here we already owned the station and needed to simply upgrade our broadcast capacity. I couldn't raise that money. I got a lot of PR investments, PR, public relations investments, but I could not get them to go really into it as a serious business venture, because that just wasn't done in a black business at that time.
What gave you the courage to buy the radio station?
I'm not sure that I had the courage. I just believed I could do it. And I learned a profound lesson about approaching everything with beginner's eyes. Don't go in with attitudes, particularly negative, that cause you to say, oh, I can't do that. Because all that means is you won't do it. Because you can do whatever you decide to do. And so I didn't know, like all experienced people knew, that I wasn't supposed to be able to buy that radio station when I had no money. I believed I could raise the money. And so I gave notice in a telegram before the expiration of the lowest price offer. And I knew that it would take 4 months to put the application through the FCC. And I had that amount of time to raise the money. Now, had I had expertise, I would have known that was impossible. Or at least I would have decided that's impossible. Which led me to the understanding, never say no to yourself. Have the courage of your conviction. Be willing to do the work you need to do to achieve it. Don't shortchange that, and believe you can do it. Believe. I ended up with an AM/FM radio station because of that belief.
What advice would you give based on everything you've learned?
Fundamentally, believe in yourself. And know that if you're willing to do what you need to do, to work as hard and study as hard as you need to do, you can achieve anything. we have a tendency to blame things external to us for the failure to achieve. Oh, my teacher didn't like me, or something else. But until you can get an obstacle-free day, it does not matter what the obstacle is. Our obligation is to go around them, over them, through them, to overcome them. Not to get hung up on what they are, but to be hung up on not letting obstacles defeat us, and most importantly, not let external things define us. Our definition is internal.
Thank you very much for having this interview with me.
And thank you for asking.